Today we have the privilege to hearing from the next generation of thinkers and leaders our young scholars who will present their groundbreaking research. And I invite our first presenter, Muhammad Saiful Islam Shanto from Bangladesh, paper title, Environmental Impact Assessment, EIA, the critical tool for sustainable development in the face of global challenges.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. This is Muhammad Saiful Islam Shanto, postgraduate student from the Department of International Relations at Jahangir University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. And it is really a great honor and privilege for me to stay here at the CPD Climate Week 2025. The title of my paper is Environmental Impact Assessment, Critical Tool for Sustainable Development in the Face of Global Challenges. So we all know this critical tool, and in my paper I would like to share my thoughts. Basically, you know that how the strategic proactive EIA can help us in building a sustainable future, and then I will discuss how this powerful tool must evolve to meet the complex realities of our time. So over the next few minutes, we will take a brief journey together, and we will start by understanding the current environmental situations in the world, and we will then look at where basically EIA come from, and then we will see how it connects to global goals and critically identify why basically conventional EIA is failing, and then we will explore a vision for revitalized next generation EIA that can truly help us in building a sustainable future. So before we move into the data or move into the main part, I would like you to all imagine a small village that is so beautiful, greenery, and there you can find some river. So let's call it Shonapur village. So the thing is that why we can call it a land of gold, because there are some beautiful thing, greenery issues, and every people thrives is there, that there are rivers, clean water, and abundant fish. So one day, some practitioners and developers come to the village and they make a proposal that they want to build a large factory in Shonapur village. So, and also they promise us a lot of jobs and prosperity there, and they conduct conventional EIA, that environmental impact assessment. So that was a box ticking system, and that was thick, and that was politically influenced, and as a result, they just completed it so early. And what happened later? And they also approved the project. So what happened later, 5 years later, we see that the Shonapur village is no longer as like the land of gold. The river is dark, the fish are gone, people are getting soon, and the jobs are few. And the most important thing is the prosperity never truly meet with the people of the Shonapur village. So what's the problem here? The problem is that EIA report, the conventional EIA report, that was just a piece of paper and a box that was ticked. And it saw just the development of the factory. It never see what will happen is the future of the Shonapur village. So this is the story, right? This is the story is happening in countless places around the world. And it brings us to the heart of our discussion today. So we all know that we are now living in a polycrisis situation, right? So what is polycrisis? Basically, polycrisis is a situation where you will find the climate change, biodiversity loss, and social inequality. Everything is working together and making worse the whole environment togetherly. So the scientific evidence is that it's overwhelming, and IPCC already tell us that the temperature, global temperatures already right at 1.26 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels. And WWF also reports that the wildlife populations have declined by an average of 69% since 1970. So the old way doing things is not simply working. And in this reality, the EIA cannot just be a formality, and it must be our first line of defense, and it must be revitalized and reinvented. So the central argument, central statement of my paper is that the conventional EIA is not enough for the complexity of the 21st century, and we must transfer it from a simple compliance exercise to a strategic and proactive tool. And obviously, the paper argues that we need a next generation EIA that should be strategic, proactive, innovative, and obviously there should be the ensuring of environmental justice. Based on this argument, my paper traces basically the evolution of EIA, as I already mentioned, and it also examines its links to the global goals, and it also analyzes the critical weaknesses of the EIA, and it will outline a clear path forward with policy recommendations. Where did EIA basically come from? We all know that it had very novel beginnings, and it was born from a rising public consciousness in the 1960s. And you know that a time when people basically began to see the damage being done to our planet. And this movement led to the development, you all know that, of the National Environment Policy Act in the USA. And for the first time, government was legally required to stop and think about the environmental consequences of its actions. And we all know that Canada, Australia, New Zealand then adopted this NEPA model. And now, over 100 countries with have now EIA laws. We all know that EIA basically follows some steps. Basically, they follow 6 main steps, that is screening, scoping, assessment, mitigation, reporting, and obviously monitoring. But the thing is that the problem is that they are just only focused on one individual projects rather than multiple projects. And in my paper, I try to identify why conventional EIA is failing the planet. And in my paper, I found that there are 4 problems basically. And the first is the box ticking syndrome. We know that the environmental EIA becomes just a piece of paper to be signed, and it is a legal step and not a real safeguard. And we all know that people are just focusing on to complete the process as early as possible, and they do not focus on protecting the environment. And as a result, we see that the EIA practitioners or regulators always try to make it abrupt. And the second problem is the big blind spot. We all know that EIA often ignores cumulative impacts, like it looks, as I already mentioned, it only one project by itself. And as a result, many small projects can up to at the same time, and together they can destroy a whole ecosystem over the time. And the third problem is the politics of scope. We all know that sometimes political groups or parties can influence the entire EIA process, and they can make the study narrow, and they also hide the most serious negative impacts, and sometimes sustainable ideas are never even discussed. And the final problem is that the outdated informations. That's a big problem. We know that EIA often uses climate data from the past. But you all know that our climate is changing day by day, and it is changing so quickly. So the past cannot predict the future anymore, and they are also not resilient to future risks. But we can fix this problem. So we can force the next generation EIA. And in my paper, I propose 4 levers for this transformation. And the first is mainstream climate resilience, that we must ensure the mainstream climate resilience. This means every EIA must look both 2 ways. Like first is we should assess the project's impact on climate. And the second is the future climate impacts on the project. And second, we must move forward like some simple public participation to true environmental justice. And this means we should empower the marginal communities, and we should hear from them, and we should also ensure their participations in the decision-making process. And the third is the digital revolution. That means we obviously must embrace the digital revolutions. You all know that satellite data, AI, modeling, and digital platforms can give us a faster, more accurate, and obviously more transparent picture of the potential impacts. And finally, we must create the living EIA. That means the assessment should not just be a static report. It should be a dynamic tool that guides monitoring and adaptive management throughout the entire life of our project. So if we follow these 4 levels for these transformations, I think we will achieve a next generation EIA that will be resilient, equitable, and efficient. So in my paper, I also propose another assessment tool. You all know that strategic environmental assessment. It was like that. It was developed in the late 1980s and 1990s. So why it was developed? You all know that the limitations on project level EIA. That means project level EIA often take a lot of time to make decisions. But on the other hand, strategic environment assessment is so proactive rather than reactive. And the thing is that it can assess entire policies, plans, and programs on time. And it allows us to compare different paths before we're locked into a single project. So we have so much global ambitions like SDGs, Paris Agreement, and Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework that was a historical agreement, that was signed in 2022. So, but we must make them work in a local reality, because with our real actions, we cannot say that this is good. So this is where a modern, proactive, strategic, and dynamic EIA is so important. So let's look at the SDGs. We all know that we have 2030 agenda, and it has sustainable development goals. So how are good EIA important in this regard? We know it helps with climate action SDG 13, and it protects life below water, and it safeguards life on land SDG 15, and it also helps build sustainable goals and sustainable cities SDG 11. Then we have also a Global Ambitions Paris Agreement. We all know that the main aim of Paris Agreement is to limit global warming to well-being 2 degrees Celsius to below 2 degrees Celsius. So in this regard, a climate smart EIA is the key thing. The thing is that these climate smart EIA checks if a new project fits our climate promises, and this also stops us from building things that harm our future. So next, we have the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. EIA also help us follow this plan, and it also pushes projects to be nature positive. So you see, this new EIA is a vital bridge, and it turns our global ambitions into real local actions. So let me show 3 examples of these approaches from around the world. First, we can see the Denmark. In Denmark, we know there was a project, Hornsrev Wine Farm. So the EIA process there led to changes in the wine farm's layout to protect bird migration routes. And it proved that science-based adaptive EIA can balance green energy and biodiversity. And another cautionary tale is that in Brazil, there is another project, Belo Monte Dam. It was totally opposite thing. That was totally politically influenced, and we already mentioned in our one problem that politics of scope. So where I mentioned that whenever EIA process is totally mentioned, political influence, on that time there will be negative impacts. And the thing is that 20,000 people displacement we see, and there is so serious ecological harm. And there is another emerging challenge in USA. We see that the rapid expansion of data centers, and it highlights the failure to assess cumulative impacts on energy. So in my paper, I propose 5 key policy recommendations. The first is we should make strategic environment assessment mandatory for all major public policies, and we should strengthen EIA laws to include climate vulnerability and biodiversity impact assessment, and we should institutionalize the environmental justice. We should invest in digital transformation and training for EIA practitioner regulations, and we should require adaptive management. Finally, we can say that the polycrisis we face demands more from us. The conventional, box-ticking, politically influenced EIA is no longer enough. So the path forward is to reinvent this tool, and obviously we have to create a next generation EIA that will be strategic and proactive, climate resilient, and it should be digitally empowered, and it should be adaptive. If we follow this, in this way we can transform these global ambitions into real actions. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I would be very happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much.